we're leaning more and more on digital systems for pretty much everything, right? Running our communities, just managing our day-to-day lives. But, does going digital automatically mean things get fairer?
That's a huge question.
It is, and it's really the question we're tackling today. We're doing a deep dive into the ethical infrastructure being built by the IXO Spatial Web. We've got some really interesting material here from Graeme at IXO.
Exactly. And look, our goal here isn't just talking about some new tech. We're trying to understand how IXO is attempting to bake ethics right into the core of their system.
Right.
It's about moving past talking about fairness and actually building systems where fairness is just fundamental, how it operates.
Okay, so let's unpack that first idea then. Equitable for all. When we talk about the IXO Spatial Web, what does that look like?
What's really striking is IXO's focus on making sure nobody gets left behind in this digital shift. They're setting up these transparent ways for communities to govern themselves digitally. And these methods are designed so you can use them even with basic smartphones, using text-based systems like USSD.
USSD.
Yeah, which is crucial for reaching people where internet might be patchy or non-existent. So while some are building for the high-end users, IXO seems to be trying to widen the playing field right from the start. It feels fundamentally inclusive.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Making sure people get rewarded fairly for what they do. How does IXO approach that?
This ties back into empowering individuals, right? IXO is working on systems where if you take a verified action or make a positive impact, you get directly rewarded with digital tokens. And the idea is to cut out the middlemen, so the value flows straight to the people actually creating it.
So ensuring that if someone puts in the work or does something good, they see the benefit directly. Makes sense. Got a specific example?
Yeah, think about, say, a local recycling program they might set up. A resident collects plastic bottles, maybe uses their phone to scan them, creating a digital record.
Okay.
Once the Oracle verifies, digital tokens are immediately sent to that resident's digital wallet.
And these tokens, they're usable.
Potentially, yeah. Maybe in local markets that are part of the network or for other services. The key thing is it's automated, it's verifiable, and it aims to be transparently fair.
Now, the materials also emphasize people's participation. How's that built into the IXO Spatial Web?
This is important. It gets to how decisions actually get made. IXO isn't trying to create a system where some central boss calls all the shots.
Right.
Instead, the governance structure is designed to be built in. Local stakeholders, people on the ground, they act as what IXO calls agents. Yeah, within their specific domains. Think of those like digital community spaces or areas. And these agents have real power, real influence to propose things, vote on things, make decisions that affect their community directly.
So it's a more decentralized approach to decision-making. Can you give an example of how these agents might actually use that influence?
Sure. Imagine a community sees a need for, say, a new health clinic or maybe fixing up a local road. Through their digital organization on the IXO platform, community members acting as agents can formally propose the project. They can discuss it with their neighbors, hash out the details, and then cast their votes digitally.
And it's all recorded.
Exactly. Every decision, every vote, it's transparently recorded on that digital ledger we mentioned. This really reinforces that sense of civic agency. Your voice, your vote within your local domain actually counts and is seen to count.
That direct involvement, that ownership.
Yeah, that sounds crucial for building trust and real community buy-in. Okay, another really key principle seems to be sovereign data rights. Sounds like putting individuals firmly back in control of their own info.
Absolutely. This is a big one. On IXO, the starting principle is that individuals have non-negotiable control over their personal data.
How does that work technically?
They use something called verifiable credentials. Think of them like digital ID cards, but much smarter. They let you share very specific pieces of information about yourself, like proof of age or a qualification without having to reveal everything else.
Okay.
And this data is stored securely in what they call IXO private data vaults. These are essentially personal digital lockers that only the user owns and controls.
Right.
It completely flips the usual model where big companies hold all our data and we're kind of the product.
Yeah.
Here, the idea is you own your data, you control access, you own the value derived from it.
Unlike so many systems we use now where our data feels like it belongs to the platform.
Here, the individual is the gatekeeper. Can you walk us through a practical scenario?
Yeah, okay. Think about someone who's been vaccinated. Maybe a refugee who needs to prove their vaccination status for travel or to access certain services.
Sure.
With a verifiable credential, they could present just the digital proof of that specific vaccination to the authority that needs it.
Just the vaccination status.
Just that. The rest of their health history, other personal details, stays locked away and private in their data vault. They only reveal the precise piece of info required for that interaction, and it's all secured using cryptography, so the authority can trust the credential is real without seeing anything extra.
That's a very clear example.
Yeah.
Privacy and security designed right in. The material also talks about safety by design. What's involved there?
This connects to data trustworthiness. How do you know the information in the system is reliable? IXO is building on what they call a W3C compliant graph of linked data.
Okay, sounds technical again.
It is a bit, but think of it like a super organized, interconnected web of information. It follows global web standards, the W3C standards, which makes it easier for different systems to understand and, crucially, trust the data from each other.
And how is it kept safe?
The key part is that every single interaction, every piece of data added, is recorded permanently and transparently as a digitally signed transaction on a blockchain.
The blockchain ledger.
Exactly. So every piece of data has this unchangeable, auditable history, like a digital fingerprint and timestamp that can't be faked or altered later. This creates a very high degree of trustworthiness without needing some central validator checking everything.
So that immutable record. Now, inevitably, in any system, choices have to be made, sometimes difficult trade-offs. How does IXO handle those with what they call uncompromising integrity?
This is where their governance tools, especially for decentralized autonomous organizations, really come into play. The goal is to make handling these trade-offs completely transparent. If there's a proposal, maybe about resource allocation or a policy change that involves compromise, it's openly discussed by the members of that specific DAO or community.
And then
They vote on it. And the outcome, the decision, is enacted in a way that's publicly verifiable on the ledger. It's about making sure the process for handling difficult choices is itself open, fair, and has integrity.
Okay, last principle on our list. Justice. How does IXO frame that? It's a big concept.
It is, and IXO's approach seems less about reacting after an injustice has occurred and more about being proactive, building fairness into the system's design from the outset.
How?
Through these transparent and often automated flows of funding, data, and governance that we've been talking about. The aim is to try and prevent exploitation or inefficiency right from the start, making sure resources and opportunities actually reach the people they're intended for.
So designing systems to inherently promote fairness, how might that work in a real-world context?
Okay, think about funding for an education program. Let's say funds are specifically meant for teachers' salaries to ensure they show up and teach.
Right.
On the IXO Spatial Web, you could set it up so those funds are automatically released directly to the teachers' digital wallets only when they submit verifiable proof, maybe digitally signed attendance records.
Triggered by proof of work.
Exactly. That automated process bypasses a lot of the traditional bureaucratic steps where funds can sometimes get delayed, misused, or even siphoned off. It reduces opportunities for corruption and inefficiency.
That's a really potent example of how this kind of tech could create more accountable, more just systems, ensuring resources actually get where they're supposed to go. Powerful stuff. Okay, so wrapping things up then, it really sounds like the IXO Spatial Web is fundamentally trying to construct a sort of foundational layer for a more ethical digital future.
I think that's a fair summary. Their consistent focus on these core principles, equity, fair rewards, radical accessibility, people's participation, sovereign data rights, safety by design, that uncompromising integrity, and justice. It really points towards a deep commitment to building what they explicitly call a trust architecture.
Yeah, it's clearly more than just the tech itself. It feels like a very deliberate attempt to weave ethical thinking into the actual fabric of how these digital systems are supposed to work.
And that, I think, brings us to a really important takeaway thought for you, the listener. What are the implications if we start embedding ethics this deeply into the infrastructure of our digital world? What could that really mean for the future of governance, for how services get delivered, and ultimately for empowering individuals? And maybe also, how could some of these principles apply, or how should they apply to the other digital platforms you interact with every single day?
Definitely food for thought as our lives become ever more digital. Lots to consider there.